Hello, and thanks for joining me. I get comments.
Naturalism is a convenient way around design. Naturalism allows the adherent to assume inevitability, without explaining why it's inevitable.
I don't suppose you'd care to explain why God is inevitable, would you? Certainly apologists and theologians have tried to do this, but the answers they've given over the centuries have fallen apart under scrutiny, or can, for all we know, be applied to the fundamental structure of the universe. Under naturalism, either something very basic and very necessary is going on at the deepest layers of reality, something which quarks and quasars and Quentin Tarantino all inevitably derive from, just as the deep complexity of the Mandelbrot set derives from a very basic formula, or the universe we live in is simply and ultimately a brute contingent fact, with no ultimate explanation. Those are the only two possible explanations for why God exists rather than doesn't exist, and there's no non-question-begging reason to deny them to naturalism.
I am an atheist, but I do not think that I agree with you 100% about doxastic involuntarism. Given sufficient motivation, I believe that most people can exert some degree of voluntary control over what they believe, though in different cases, the degree of cognitive strain required to do so can vary. Your illustration of asking people to believe that London is the capital of France is a false analogy, in that you are asking people to believe something that would take a ginormous degree of cognitive strain to choose to believe, and comparing it to the concept of God which, due to the way the human brain evolved, requires a particularly low degree of cognitive strain.
First of all, even though I talk about it a lot on this channel, I'm not married to the idea of doxastic involuntarism, which is the view that one cannot choose what to believe and what not to believe simply by an act of will. Nor am I a strong doxastic involuntarist. I don't completely rule out the possibility of some belief being chosen by will, although I don't know what such a belief might be. But if the example of London being the capital of France involves too much of what you call cognitive strain to be an effective example, then let's take the example of a jar full of jelly beans. If you look at all such jars that have been filled without regard to precisely how many jelly beans would ultimately go into the jar, statistically, about half of them should contain an even number of jelly beans. So it should require little or no cognitive strain to believe that this particular jar I'm showing you contains an even number of jelly beans. Can you, by an act of will alone, believe that there are an even number of jelly beans in this jar? I don't think you can. In fact, I'd say it's easier to voluntarily believe in God than to believe that there are an even number of jelly beans in this jar. With God, you have millions of people and billions of dollars invested in a worldwide infrastructure of rituals, information sharing, cultural norms, and so on, which we know may well trigger a belief in God if you immerse yourself in them. There's no such infrastructure for there being an even number of jelly beans in this jar. Doxastic involuntarism is a charitable position to hold, in the sense that it entails a form of friendly atheism. You can't fault someone for believing in God if, ultimately, it's not their fault that they believe. So without that position, I'd probably have to rethink a few things I've said on this channel, but I would have a new line of attack for theism. I could say to the theist, you could become an atheist pretty much anytime you wanted to, but you choose not to, and this is a poor choice because, and then I list the reasons. As it is, the closest I can come is, you choose to spread false information about creationism and so on, and that's wrong. And involuntarily believing that creationism is true is no excuse, because the kind of education that everyone should as a matter of course receive in school is enough to overturn that belief in the truth of creationism, just as it's enough to overturn a belief that London is the capital of France. Speaking of creationism,
Challenge puzzle for the evolutionists. 330 million blind creatures want to see, and all they can see is darkness even though there is light out there. They don't know there is light out there. How will they make the optical nerves, with the eyeball and the lens to focus the light with, without ever experiencing the light first? To know the properties of light, they would first have to experiment with light first.
why do creationists think that every atheist, just by publicly declaring their atheism, has agreed to serve as biology teacher at large? Saying that atheism requires you to know all the ins and outs of evolution is like saying that because YouTuber Godless Granny is a grandmother, that must mean she is an expert on human reproduction. And you know, I don't think Godless Granny wants to spend the rest of her life giving the birds and the bees speech to everyone who demands it, do you, Granny?
What was that? No. No, I wouldn't want to give the birds and the bees speech. The talk. To anyone that demands it. Why would I want to do that? And, by the way, why haven't we seen your guinea pigs lately?
So yeah, that's one of the reasons I don't talk about evolution and creation a lot on this channel. The sheer sense of entitlement that many creationists have is just nauseating. There's a verse in the Bible that gives the measurement of a circle as 10 cubits in diameter and 30 cubits in circumference, which would give pi a value of 3. Now this can easily be explained as a rounding error, but imagine a large group of Christians who actually take the whole inerrancy thing seriously, who define pi as being exactly 3 and make mathematical arguments to atheists, arguments that are not even wrong, such as, if perfect circles don't exist in reality, then you've never measured one, so you don't know what pi is, do you? And even your precious scientists admit that your value of pi is an irrational number. Yes, creationists, that is what you sound like. Anyway, the first organisms on Earth to develop photosensitive cells capable of reacting to light did so because of a random mutation. They didn't go out looking for light, they were probably surprised as hell that this thing we call light existed. And I'm speaking poetically because a bacterium doesn't experience surprise, nor does it intentionally set out to make anything such as optical nerves. Natural selection is not artificial selection or genetic engineering. The new Cosmos episodes with Neil deGrasse Tyson actually gives a great overview of how the eye might develop naturally and gradually, starting with those photosensitive cells I mentioned.
In December 3rd to 9th, 2008, I went to a coma as a result of a massive stroke due to a car accident. I went into a religious man and woke up as an skeptical atheist. Basically, my basal ganglia was flooded with blood. The basal ganglia houses a love hormone. However, I voted and will vote for our President Trump.
To paraphrase a fantastic comment from the same video, I got a traumatic brain injury and now Trump strikes me as a great president isn't the flex you think it is. Speaking of Trump,
leave politics out of your videos, please. FFS. There are conservative atheists that watch. No, I don't think Trump is Jesus, but please, this liberal woke nonsense is worse and really puts me off listening to you.
I have made a conscious choice on this channel not to do political videos, and if I've lived up to that, then hopefully you can't tell whether I'm a liberal, a libertarian, a communist, an anarchist, or even an old school conservative. If I haven't lived up to that, then, well, fair enough. I'll try to do better. But every so often, a bit of political content does creep in, like when I mentioned Trump. That having no president at all for 4 years would have been better than having Trump as president may be a controversial statement as far as reality is concerned. That Trump was a bad president and a liar is not, and millions of conservatives in this country will agree that it's not. I mean, for crying out loud, for the first time in this nation's history, we have a former president of the United States invoking the Fifth Amendment. And contrary to popular myth, you can infer guilt from someone taking the Fifth Amendment in a civil action. So yeah, occasionally something like this will slip out. But for the sake of my viewers who hate all kinds of politics, as well as my own blood pressure, I will try to keep Trump comments and other political comments to an absolute minimum.
It takes modest common sense to realize why a person finds themselves being atheist. It's because they've already been perfected, and this is possible. And what a dream it must be.
I have bad knees, bad hearing, and occasionally a short temper, not to mention a tendency to slip into political ranting if I'm not careful. I am far from perfect, and I always will be. By contrast, it is a core tenet of many forms of Christianity that if you're a good Christian, you yourself will be perfected upon death just by dying. Your old bodies will be destroyed in holy fire, and you will be given new, perfect, heavenly bodies, or something to that effect, just for having the right religion. I have learned from long experience that perfecting oneself can never be a destination, and that there are no shortcuts along that road.
An atheist does not allow for the existence of a God, Tata and agnostic, hence your argument fails because there are 3 states of the belief of the existence of a God. It's not binary as your whole video suggests. The words atheist and agnostic exist for a reason. They're not synonyms.
Take a blank sheet of paper. On it, write down the name or a description of every God you believe exists. When you're finished, look at it. Either you've written something on that sheet of paper or you haven't. That is a binary. If and only if that paper is still blank, then you're an atheist. Doesn't matter why you don't believe. Doesn't matter whether you identify as an atheist. Doesn't matter if you allow for the possibility of being wrong. Every smart atheist allows for the possibility of being wrong. If you do not believe, you are not a theist, which by definition makes you an atheist, the prefix a meaning not or without. Agnostic means one who doesn't know or believes it cannot be known whether God exists or what his nature is. Some agnostics are theists, most are atheists. Agnosticism is not part of the theism-atheism binary.
Allah is Jehovah. Please stop differentiating between these two. Learn your mythology. They are both the God of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, who became Israel. I get really annoyed when I hear people talking about Allah and Jehovah as if they are different mythological beings. Can you tell? Even the Bible says that Jehovah has many names. One of them is El, which in Arabic becomes Allah.
There's an obscure stage play written in the late 16th century called Edmund Ironside, written by an anonymous author. Some scholars believe that it was actually written by William Shakespeare and is one of his very first plays. Other scholars do not believe that he wrote it. Whether the man named William Shakespeare who wrote Edmund Ironside is mathematically identical to the man named William Shakespeare who did not write Edmund Ironside is largely a question of semantics. It depends on how certain words are defined and how certain concepts are interpreted. It's not a question that interests me very much. It interests me even less when we apply the concept to an imaginary being like God. Asking whether the God who talked to Abraham and Jesus is mathematically the same entity as the God who talked to Abraham, Jesus, and Muhammad is like asking how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. The point is, both Christians and Muslims believe that whether you believe that God talked to Muhammad or just Abraham and Jesus affects your eternal disposition, which is pretty monstrous when you stop and think about it.
First of all, you begin by speculating on and impugning motives, thus undermining Logan's credibility. You admit you could have checked it out beforehand, but you didn't want to bother. Atheists typically say they are not 100% certain that God doesn't exist, which is an admission that God might exist. Therefore, it would be prudent to have a defense just in case God does exist and he comes, face to face, with us when we die. Bertrand Russell was once asked what he would do if he faced God, and he was ready with an answer which was not enough evidence in quod. With that in mind, we can see why Russell might want to discredit all evidence, as evidence undermined his defense.
First of all, I didn't speculate on Logan's motives. I assume he made his video for the standard reasons that anyone has for making videos. I was speculating on whether his video was plagiarized, given how close his video was in style and content to a Craigian argument. But I gave him the benefit of the doubt, partly because he struck me as a decent kid and partly because I don't want another Almondo in my life. Are you saying I should have investigated that suspicion? Second, it's Bertrand Russell, not Bertram, and that quote is questionable. I could not find any primary source for it, and other than appearing in a 1978 paper by Wesley Salmon, the only place it really shows up is on Christian apologetics websites, right before they tell atheists, there is too enough evidence, just look at the trees. Third, if it is a genuine quote, which it might be, and if Russell really was ready with that answer as soon as he was asked the question, as you imply, it's because Russell was a very smart guy. It does not mean necessarily that he had thought about what you call a defense before that moment, nor does it mean he viewed the existence of God as a live option, meaning an option that might realistically be the case. I presume you are not 100% certain that Zoroaster does not exist. I also presume you do not have a defense ready just in case you meet Zoroaster face to face. You don't view that as a realistic option, just as many atheists do not view God as a realistic option. Fourth, if we're going to throw around accusations about Russell's motivations, then I'll go ahead and accuse you of wanting to discredit all evidence as evidence undermines your deep desire to be special in a grand cosmic sense. And finally, speaking of accusations, are you accusing all atheists of being culpable atheists? Do I need to pull out the unbeatable argument again? Because I do love pulling out the unbeatable argument.
If atheists were more like 2080 or 33-67% as a group for or against the great moral questions in society, they would do a lot more for proving their worldview is correct. However, they groupthink in 98% plus commonality. This shows religiosity, not from rationality. It shows conditioning, like what a cult goes through, and shows a spiritual influence.
See, the thing about a statement like that, it's testable. And I tested it. I ran a poll on my channel without revealing why I was asking it, but simply asking people what their position was. Moral objectivism, moral subjectivism, moral nihilism, something else, or did they have no opinion? Here are the results. As you can see, although a clear majority of respondents are subjectivists, it is nothing like 98% or even 80%. It's close to 67%, and in fact, if you discount all the moral objectivists who voted and say they're theists, and I'd be surprised if I had so many theist subscribers, you'd pretty much bring that number right between 67 and 80%, which, according to you, does a lot more for proving our worldview is correct, somehow. I mean, that's nonsense, because if our view on moral positions were uniformly derived from some mythical atheist worldview, the result of this poll would have been 100% minus the theists. Marty also commented to the effect that transgenerational adaptations derived from the epigenome are proof of creationism, which is like sitting down at the chessboard, seeing that the squares are green and white instead of the black and white you were told to expect, and declaring that you're therefore not playing chess, you're playing Candyland. And since we've come full circle back to I'm not your biology teacher, I'm going to call it there for now. But I do get a lot of comments, so to be continued. If you enjoyed this video and want to help my channel grow, please hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. Be sure to hit the bell to be notified when a new video comes out. And if you'd like to leave a comment below. Yeah, I didn't think that one through. A special thanks to my Patreon supporters. You help make this channel possible. If you'd like to become a supporter, check out the link in the description. Thanks so much for joining me, and we'll see you in the next video. I'm David John Wellman, and the rest is up to you.